We want to greet everyone in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. We're so grateful to the Lord for everyone being here today. And we're grateful that God has allowed us to see this day and to come before Him and hear the word that He has to speak to us today. All right, so if you have your Bibles, let's go to the 6th chapter of the book of Ephesians. All right, the 6th chapter of the book of Ephesians. And we're going to start reading at verse 1. It says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." Everybody see that? It tells the children to obey their parents in the Lord. You see that? And it says, "For this is right." Now, I think it's amazing that Paul here says that has to tell children, he's talking to children, to obey their parents, for it is right. Now, for God to lead Paul to say that, then it would mean that the devil would try to talk them into thinking that it was wrong, or that something was wrong with obeying their parents. Everybody understand? He didn't just say, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord." He said, "Obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." In other words, don't let the devil talk you into thinking that you're right. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. You see that? In other words, there's nothing wrong, children, with obeying your parents. But if you don't obey them, then you're wrong. You see. And now we live in an age where some children feel like they're on the same level or same page that their parents are on. You see. And now you have to know as a child, and I'm talking to you children, your parents must know a little bit more than you know. You see that? If they taught you how, you didn't potty train yourself, you didn't come here changing yourself, you didn't come here feeding yourself, you had to depend on them in those early stages, and you still, as a child, need to learn to depend on them. They know more than you know. Now, it's rebellion for a child to think that they know a little bit better, or that they don't have to mind, or whatever the case may be. That's rebellion, and I can tell you, you're walking right into a trap, children, when you purposely disobey your parents, when you've set in your heart to even have anything against your parents. I can't tell you, I've run across grown adults that have made a lot of bad decisions because as an adult they chose and they decided, I'm going to prove my parents wrong. There are still adults today who rebel against what their parents have taught them, all for the purpose of proving their parents wrong. Their parents brought them up a certain way. I didn't like the way I was brought up, and so I'm going to spend my grown adult life showing them that I can do better than what they've taught. And that's rebellion, and that's not God's will. You see that? That's not God's will for children to be like that. You see? And listen, you don't... Look at what this verse 2 says. "Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise." Everybody see that?
Amen.
Honor your father and mother. Now, the first verse 1 was for children. We're not all children. Everybody understand? And so Paul understand that. So then he says, now for you adults that think that you've gotten grown and done got somewhere, you still have to honor your parents. Now, the question is, how do you honor your parents? How do you honor your parents? To me, the same way you were raised, that's the way you are. That's how you honor them, by being the way that you were raised in the Lord. Everybody understand? Amen. Now let me use this as an example. If I were a woman and I grew up in a household, being, as a young girl, to wear dresses and skirts, and I knew that that's what my parents taught me, that's the way I'd be when I'm at their house. That's the way I would be. Doesn't matter how much freedom I think I have now. I think it's disrespectful if your parents have raised you to wear skirts and dresses, and that's all they let you wear, and then you bopping over their house in pants and shorts. You're dishonoring them. You see that? So it goes beyond what you think. Get out of that mindset of what you think your rights are now that you're grown. God is still saying you need to honor your parents. You see that? Now, as long as you got parents, you need to honor them. You see that? You honor them with your choices. You honor them with how they raised you. So if you know that they didn't allow you to do certain things, you don't wait till you get grown and then come up in their house doing those things that they didn't allow. That's dishonor. You see that? That's dishonoring them. It doesn't matter, now in your mind, you may just, this is the way I am. That may be the way you think. But you know what God sees it as? You being disrespectful, you being dishonoring, and the devil's really using you to shake your fist at what you've been taught when you were growing up. So it says, to honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be what? Well. You know how many adults I've come across miserable lives? You ever wonder why some adults, it's not well with them? You see that? That it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long on the earth. So a lot of times when we're talking about honor, the first commandment with promise, honoring your parents, a lot of times we're thinking about the lifespan of a child. You're not going. God may cut your years short. That's what we may think. But that's not the only thing it says here. So while God is allowing you to live, He's saying it's not going to be well with you. That rebellion that's on the inside of you, that's going to cause you to bump your head in all kind of ways. You see that? It won't be well with you. Now, I feel like this. We already got the devil to deal with. We don't need to be bringing any more upon ourselves than what we're going to already go through. Amen. You see that? Verse 3, that it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long on the earth. Everybody see that? That's true now. God's word it has not expired. That's the truth. You see, people, we cut our lives short by dishonoring our parents, and and the little life that we do have is miserable if we don't honor them. You see. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is what we see in verse 4. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Provoke not your children to wrath. Now, we went over the first 3 verses for this reason. Because as parents, and God have blessed us with children as parents, there's authority that comes with us as being parents. Everybody understand? We have authority over our children, and we, especially if we're raising them where they have reverential fear of us, they're going to do what we tell them to do. But I'm gonna tell you, with power comes responsibility. And you have to be careful how you are, you see, with people, with your children, in other words. So we can't just say, well, I'm the parent and you're going to do it because I said so. That's not enough. We have that authority. Now that's what the Bible makes clear. We have that authority, and if we have decent children, they're going to do what we tell them, and they're not going to talk back and things like that. But then God gets on us as parents and tells us, since I've given you that authority over your children, don't you provoke them. Now, most of us, that work secular jobs, we know how it is. We go in for work, we have a supervisor or a manager or whatever, and we're going to do what that manager says. But how many of us have ever been on a job where that manager overstepped their bounds? They know that you need a check, they know that you got bills to pay, and therefore they feel like you're going to do whatever I tell you to do. You see? And I'm going to overstep my bounds with you. You see? And so if you were in that situation, you felt like they were just bullies, or they were just, taking advantage of you and really provoking you. And so God is telling us as parents that we're not to bully our children either. We are not to provoke them. You see that? Look what that says. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture. Everybody see that? We get what the root word of nurture is? Nurse. You know what a nurse does? They care for people. When you're talking about somebody nursing somebody, you're talking about caring for people. If you've ever been in a hospital, ever had anything to do with the medical field, you know how nurses can be the most caring people. You see, doctors come in, they talk with you for a minute, write out something, and they gone. Nurses, they come in, they're the ones that's doing the work. They're the ones that's actually taking care of you. And you can be laying in your bed and all dirty and filthy. Don't bother them. They're just used to it. You see, nurses take care of people no matter what state they're in. Everybody understand? And they're not thinking, oh, you're just as raggedy and, Nurses, if you pay attention, I pay attention to that. They treat everybody just about the same. I'm talking about the good nurses now. They're there to care for you and what we call nurture you. In other words, to make you a nurse is there, and when you're nurturing something, you're making it better. Now, this message kind of goes along with what we were talking about last week about the gall of bitterness. Bitter parents raise bitter children. You can only pour into a child what you have to give. So if you take a child that grow up, maybe they had a rough life or whatever, and they couldn't get over it, they couldn't forgive their parents, they just still got something in their heart towards their parents, you think they're going to raise their child loving? It's impossible. They're going to put in that child whatever it is that they have. So if you take a child that grow up and they didn't like the rules, they're going to go overboard with making sure, I'm not going to put all that on my children. That. So is it the problem is not between the teenage or the 20-year-old adult with a child or 30-year-old adult with a child, and the 30-year-old adult is spoiling the child and they ain't doing the child like they should, as far as raising them. The problem is with the 30-year-old child and the 60-year-old mother or father. That's the relationship that need to be healed first. Because the 30-year-old, they don't like the way the 60-year-old raised them. So now I'm going to do just the opposite with my children. I'm going to give them whatever they want. I'm not going to set boundaries because I didn't like boundaries. Even though those boundaries is part of the reason why I'm still alive today. You see? And so it tells us to provoke not our children to wrath. So this tells us, now one thing we have to realize as parents, and if we're not careful, we don't give our children that room, that children are children. They're children. They're not as emotionally stable as you're supposed to be. Everybody understand? So look at what this tells us as parents, not to provoke our children to wrath just because you have learned to put on a smiley face around people. Just because you have learned how to halfway control your emotions, children aren't built that way. They're not mature in that area yet. And so if you provoke them, you can provoke them to wrath. Why? Because the people they know as the ones that are supposed to be nurturing them, the ones that are supposed to be caring for them, they got something in their hearts towards them. And that's a bad feeling for a child to have. You want to know the reason why so many children are discouraged in school? You know, when they are in school and committing suicide because of bullying and things like that. Bullies aren't new. They had bullies when I was in school. They aren't nothing new. But I'm going to tell you what the big difference is. It's because when I was in school, we dealt with bullies too. But when I was in school, I had something stable to come home to. Amen. Everybody understand? I had something to come home. I had a world away from that world that I could come home to. And it's not right that a child goes to school and deal with pressures and get bullied in school only to come home to a bully. Now, you may, when I say bully and provoking, we're not talking about just parents that's just mean, that's just always stomping on their children, always whooping them. You can whoop your child emotionally. You can provoke them, that which is one of the worst. Listen, a child would almost rather you whoop them than torment their brain and provoke their minds to wrath. You don't tease your children. Rarely will that child run into an adult other than their own parent that encouraged them. That's very rare. Now they're hardly paying teachers anything, and so teachers are just there to get paid. Very few of them that's actually got that kind of calling on their life. You see. And so God have given us as parents the authority. We can either make our child or break them. You see that? In the same way we can encourage them with words, we can break their spirits to where they just feel like they can't get above the words that you speak. So, if the Bible tells us as parents not to provoke our children to wrath, isn't it only right that we can provoke them to love and some kind of emotional stability there? In other words, we can encourage our children. You know, most of the time when children are just entering school, when they're young, the teachers are going to ask who their heroes are. It shouldn't be Superman. Everybody understand? It shouldn't be some fictional character that they've seen on TV. The child's hero need to be their parents. That's who they need to be. A child should have their parent there to ensure them of their future. Let me make this clear. Parents, there is more to raising a child than feeding it and giving it a place to stay. More to it than that. Now, that might be satisfying in your mind. God expects us as parents to have relationships with our children, to get to know them, to know who they are, what makes them function, to talk to them. But you know, part of the problem today is, and the devil's real slick about it, those discussions oftentimes took place around the dinner table. Now there is no dinner table. You see that? Now when we sit down and eat, we sit in front of a TV. Everybody have their own device to keep them busy. Nobody's discussing anything. Don't know what the children's thinking, don't care what Junior's plans are when he leaves. Just know when you're 18, you're getting out of here. That's not the way God want to. The children can't wait till they're 18 and the parents can't either. That's not the way God intends for our relationship to be with our children and for their relationship to be with us. We can't, God don't intend for us to be counting down the years and thinking that we're in prison until they're all gone.
Amen.
Now I'm going to tell you, if that's your mindset, you ain't got to say it. That child's going to know through your actions. You can't help but to act out what's in your heart. So it is not God's will. You see that? We are to, as parents, we ought to feel like it's a privilege that God has blessed us with the responsibility to be able to pour into another human being.
Amen.
Everything that child is what we pour into them. And their ability their capability to refuse the enemy, to overcome every temptation that the devil brings is because of what they see in us and how we've treated them. You know why a lot of our children aren't concerned with serving God? Is because they don't see us serving Him. You see, if God is real to you, He'll become real to them. At least they'll have something to come back to. Even if they do choose to walk another path, they'll at least know whether God that mom and daddy was serving, that was real, and I can go to that.
Amen.
Now, let me look at the other side of this, what it's talking about. Provoke not your children to wrath. For us parents that think it's okay to we just feel like, well, I'm going to give my child anything they want. They'll never hear me say no. It's the same thing as provoking them to wrath. Because at some point, that child is going to get old enough to know that them getting everything they ever desired was not right. They're going to know that that's not parenting at all. That was just you pacifying them to get them out of your face, get them out of your hair. That's what I call lazy parenting. You come to me with a question? No, no, you're not getting that. Just because. Yeah, I got the money. Well, no, we're not poor, but you still not getting it. I'm not going to work extra shifts. And then get bitter because I'm working extra shifts. You see? At some point, trust me, that little 10-year-old that's right now enjoying the benefits of having a lazy parent that's going to give them everything they want and don't want to parent them, at 15, they're going to know that was not real parenting. You were giving them things to babysit them, to get them out of your hair, that you weren't loving them at all. What kind of God would we be serving? Now, I want you to think about something. How many of us have ever asked God for something that He didn't give us? How many of us at some point matured enough to know, I'm glad you didn't? You see? So if God had given us everything that we wanted, we'd be in trouble. If not dead. And God expects us to be the same parent that you see that He is. Provoke not your children to wrath. Don't let them get old enough to realize, wait a minute, that wasn't parenting. I shouldn't have I'm spoiled and ruined. I can't even have a good relationship now because I think I'm just going to get in my way all the time. Because I think I'm just going to have my way. I can't even have a good functional relationship because people aren't treating me the way that my parents treated me. After a while, that's going to turn back. They're going to be looking at you as a parent, knowing that you ruined them. And now God's got to go through all this work, converting your mind, not only converting your mind, but fixing your heart so that you'll walk in forgiveness towards that parent that ruined you, that spoiled you. You see. Let's go real briefly to the 3rd chapter of the book of Colossians. All right, and we're going to start reading at verse 18. It says, "Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands, as it is fit in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives, and be not bitter against them." Everybody see that? Now again, when you read something, you always have to think about what you're reading, and think about why God put that in there. It is God's will. If God have given you a spouse, you wives, if God have blessed you with a husband, that husband should be more mature in the Lord, because he's supposed to pour the word of God inside of in you. You see, and so you husbands, that's the mind that you have to have. If God have blessed you with a wife, then He's designed you to nurture that wife and to give her the word and to wash her with the word. Now, with that being said, if God have made it that way, and that's God's will, now the wife ain't supposed to be teaching the husband's supposed to be teaching the wife concerning the things of God and the word of God. That means if God have put you in a place as a husband to pour into your wife, that means that she got room to grow. That means that there's some things on the inside of her that will be clear to you that she needs to mature in. And so if God have made you the head, husbands, that means He's made you more mature spiritually. That means you need patience to deal with where your wife is. Because listen, you can't have it both ways. Now, other than that, y'all equal partners, and we know that that's not the word.
Amen.
So if you want to be the head, that means being patient to deal with someone that's following you, that's someone that you have to lead. You can't say, well, I'm the husband and, my wife have to submit to me and I'm the head, and then get mad because she's in a place where she needs to submit to you. Where she's in a place where she needs to be fed the word of God. In other words, where she has to grow in you, by you. So, you see, that tells us husbands, don't be bitter in their growing process. You see, again, you can't have it both ways. Your wife comes under your authority. That means that she's got some growing to do, and you're supposed to be spiritually mature, you see, and so therefore you need to be patient as well, and don't get bitter because she got to grow. You see that? So look at what that says, verse 20. "Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well pleasing unto the Lord." So when the child does not obey their parents in all things, then what is it? Displeasing. All right? Look at what verse 21 says. "Fathers, provoke not your children to anger." Everybody see that? See, so for the Bible to tell us as parents not to provoke our children to anger, that means we have the power. We're emotionally tied to that child where we can provoke them to anger. Everybody understand? I want you to think about something. If you don't, unless you just have a spirit of anger, if you don't know people, like I'm on the road all the time, and people honking their horn at me because I'm doing the speed limit. Well, I'm not getting upset. I don't know y'all. You're not going home with me, and I'm not going home with you, so I don't even feel the need to pull over and let's make it right. See? So In other words, if I'm not emotionally tied to someone, I'm not angry. They can't get me angry. Now, the way I see it, that's too much power when people can emotionally make you angry and you have no kind of tie to them. When, in other words, when somebody can provoke you to anger, you have given them power over you. We as parents, automatically, our power is attached to them because God made it that way. If that's the case, then we're responsible for how we provoke them, how we act among them. Everybody understand? We cannot, as parents, disconnect from our children and it not affect them.
Amen.
So the idea is not to say, well, you know what? We just keep bumping heads. I know I'm your father or I'm your mother and you're my child, but since we just keep bumping heads and ain't nothing right in our relationship, I'm just going to withdraw emotionally. Because parents would do that. No, God is saying, I put that emotional attachment there. You just need to handle it right.
Amen.
You see that? It's not written anywhere in the Bible where mama just got to be against daughter and daughter just has to be against mother. You see that? So if God have connected us to our children emotionally in that manner, that means that He has given us the wherewithal to be able to handle it. That we're supposed to act responsibly with it. So He tells us, He didn't tell us don't provoke our children. He said don't provoke them to anger. God intends for you to provoke them. In other words, to motivate them. But He intends for you to motivate them in His direction, in love. Your child, I'm going to tell you something. You ought to have the connection with your child. You should have the kind of connection where your child want to be just like you when you grow up. Everybody understand? They ought to want to be like you. They ought to mock and mimic you because they want to be so much like you. But now what's going on? I can't wait till I get away from home. Can't wait till that's the devil. And that's not God's will. That shows, don't accept the lie that every child that leave home, they got to rebel 2 years before they leave. That it's just got to be something in between parents and children, and that's what boosts them out the nest. That's what helped them to leave. Don't think as a parent that, it's just got to be something between y'all.
Amen.
That is meant for stuff not to be right. We'll just patch it up later when they get grown and, realize some stuff. Because some of them never realize anything. They die in rebellion. So it don't have to be that way. So don't let the devil program you to accept, well, I guess this is meant to be. We just got to be at each other's throat and just glad when the other one leave. He says, verse 21, fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be what? Now that's a bad... That tells us what? It ain't just anger. I've seen grown folks with a spirit of anger that comes from their childhood. It's not just anger that you have to be worried about. When parents provoke their children to anger, they're not just going off in a room and blowing off steam. They're discouraged. You see that? They're discouraged. Do you know? And so what happens when a child gets discouraged? They're going to go out and they're going to try to prove their parent wrong. I'm not a failure. You see that? I'm going to go out and I'm going to get all kind of degrees and never use them. See, that's what discouragement does. That's not God's will that you be discouraged. God want us as parents to provoke them and to encourage them, to tell them that they, that what God wants them to know. We see a perfect picture of that in the Bible when God calls Peter. You all know the story. The Lord was teaching from Peter's boat, and when he was done teaching, and he taught them how to fish, told them what to do to catch fish. And when Peter saw that, what did Peter say? "Depart from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man." The Lord, that was to me a pivotal point in Peter's life. The Lord could have said, "Yeah, you are a sinful man, and you're right. You're not worthy to even be in my presence." That would have all been true. But what did Peter say? What was the Lord's answer? "Fear not, from henceforth I'll make you fishers of men." Everybody see that? What was he doing? "Peter, I'm overlooked. I'm not really concerned with where you are now. I'm going to start with," and that's what we as parents have to do with our children, "I'm going to start with how you're going to end up. I'm not going to live with all the mistakes you've made," because you know what happens when you do that? You get bitter.
Amen.
As a parent. The Lord told Peter, "I'm going to start with, our relationship is going to begin with where I see you at the end of your life, a fisher of men." Now, which one of us, when we were children, weren't rascals? Which one of us came here knowing how to change our pamper? We came here making a mess. Now, could you imagine a parent being mad at a 1-month-old for messing in their pamper? Now, we as parents have enough sense not to get mad, or most of us, not to get mad and angry because that 1-month-old is doing what 1-month-olds do. Why do we get bitter when a 12-year-old do what 12-year-olds do? Children are going to make mistakes. Now, I'm not saying that we excuse them. I'm not saying that we don't discipline them. I'm saying we as parents ought to be mature enough not to keep them in their mistakes.
Amen.
We have to give them room to grow the same way God gave us room to grow. Now, I would be a discouraged somebody if every morning I woke up, the Lord was reminding me of what I did when I was 15. Or the Lord even thought about what I was doing when I was 15. Everybody understand? So we're supposed to encourage our children, and we're not going to encourage them by keeping them in a certain place. First of all, you have to realize they're growing up. Now, you as a parent, you need to ask God for patience to let your child grow up.
Amen.
And to handle it, and how to handle it, and the wisdom on how to handle it as they're growing up. In other words, if your child do something wrong today that merits a spanking, you spank them today. If they do something tomorrow that merits a spanking, you spank them tomorrow, not for yesterday and today.
Amen.
Everybody understand? If we're not careful, we'll end up taking out our frustration on them. The Bible tells us in the book of Proverbs, the rod of your anger will fail. What that means is, it's not enough not to spare the rod, parents. You do good by not sparing the rod. But what he's saying is there's an attitude that comes with that rod. And if that rod comes with anger, it'll fail. In other words, it won't do you any good. What is that saying? Don't whoop your children when you're mad at them. Your children shouldn't even have that kind of control over you to get you mad. See how all of this has to balance itself out? You can't. You have to be able, parents, to spank your child when they've done something wrong, not when they've made you mad or angry.
Amen.
Now, if you're one of those parents, they have to get you mad to spank them. It's because you have disconnected. You see that? And now it takes some kind of drive to get you to that point. It's like now you see what happens. You're too emotionally involved with them. Everybody understand what I mean? That means you're more concerned with being their friend than you are their parent. My children will tell you, I can be in the best of mood and I can still spank. I don't have to have a bad day at work. I don't have to go through, spend an hour in traffic trying to get home to spank them. It has nothing to do with anything but what they've done. And that's the way God wants us to see it. You see that? The rod of your ankle will fail. If you will spank them when they need to be spanked and don't get your emotions involved, what that child is doing or need has nothing to do with how your day have gone. My children can never make me have a bad day. Let's go real briefly to the 18th chapter of the book of Matthew. Now, I've heard parents say, and I've seen it for myself, they think, my parents whoop me, I ain't gonna never whoop my child. Now, I'm gonna tell you, for a parent to think that way, they first of all have to think that they didn't do anything wrong to merit those spanking. And you're going to be your child's biggest problem. You first of all have to justify in your mind all those whippings I caught. That wasn't me. I didn't do anything wrong. And that along with you thinking you know more than God knows. You see. Now, I caught plenty of whoopings growing up, but I ain't never had the mind, when I get grown, I ain't gonna never whip my children. I knew what a rascal I was. And I knew there's a law of reaping and sowing. See? All right, the 18th chapter of the book of Matthew, we're going to start reading at verse 1. It says, "At the same time came the disciples unto Jesus, saying, Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child unto him, and set him in the midst of them, and said, Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted, and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven." Everybody see that? "Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoso shall receive one such little child in my name, receiveth" who? Everybody see that? You know what it means when they say receive a little child in my name? He's talking about not being bitter against that child because you think you know more than what God knows about that child. I think it's God allowed you, especially you mothers, to go through 9 months of pregnancy, 9.5 months. The whole point is to anticipate that child getting here. Now, does it make any sense that all of the pain you go through in delivering that child, all of the heartache you go through in the pregnancy and carrying that child, you carry that child, the inside of your body, God has fixed it to where it feeds that child. They eat what you eat. That all the nutrients that you're getting, it goes to that child. It's passed on to them. That God have fixed it. That takes place on the inside of your body before you even, put a bottle in that child's mouth. You're feeding that child. You're careful for that child, to take care of that child. To make sure nothing bumps into your stomach. You ain't doing the kick worm when you're pregnant. You're not acting all wild. You're going through all of that for that child, only to let that child be born and then mistreat it when it's got ears to hear and to know what you're saying. If God had fixed it where you're taking care of that child on the inside of you, in the womb, that child is guarded. Then God can fix you where you'll nurture that child on the outside of the womb as well. You don't get mad at the child, you see, when they get here. Most of us as parents, we rejoice when that child is small. Now children don't come here bitter. They don't come here mad. They don't come here that way. So what we need to ask ourselves, in between 1 week old, when we're just loving on that child and snuggling with them, and then 10 years old or 15 years old, what has happened? How did we go from nurturing that child as a 1 week old to now we can't wait until they leave the house and they're only 12? Whose fault is it that relationship have gotten to that point? That child didn't come here thinking, well, I can't wait to get out of here. Not at 1 week. In fact, if you pay close attention to babies, when they first get here, you know why they're doing all that screaming and yelling? Because they're outside of their comfort zone. They're not used to all them lights. Now, if you ever been in the living room, you see how the nurses do. They just flipping and flopping them. And they poor babies just, trying to get their balance. Wait, whoa, So we have to ask ourselves as parents, who's responsible for the decline of the relationship? That child have gone from loving you and taking to you, crying every time they didn't see you in the room, to now they can't stand you and you can't stand them. Who's responsible? It's not them. You see that? We're the parents. We're the parents. We can't blame it on them. So the Lord is telling us we have to accept children. You see that? And look, in His name. Everybody see? You may say, well, my child, no, we're talking about you as a parent. You not provoking your child. You may say, well, my child, they always giving me attitude. My question is, when that door opened, when the first attitude struck, did you close it? Or did you think it was cute? You thought it was cute to see your little 4-year-old girl walking around with their hand on their hip? No, we stopped that junk. All that, if I see sass, it's going to get whipped. You may think it's cute, they walking around sassing and, no. So you let them grow up with that, thought it was cute until it started bouncing back on you. You see them sassing their little brother or their little sister and you think it's cute. You think that sassy mouth going to stop with the siblings? See, we raise them. And then we get mad because of the way we raised them. All right, let's go ahead and keep reading. Verse 5, and whoso shall receive one such little child in my name receiveth me. But whoso shall offend one of these, what? little ones, which believe in me. Everybody see that? It were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Now, I'm going to tell you something. There was a time I'd almost drowned, and you know the story. I can tell you from experience, that's one of the worst ways to leave here. There's no way around it. That's some suffering that's got to take place. I want you to think about how that goes on now. When you're under all that water, you can't make yourself go to sleep. You have to endure that. When you're under all that water, your brain is very aware. The only way to leave here, to get out of this, is either to be rescued or to suck water into my lungs. And to basically what you're doing is suffocating. That's the only way, only two options there. Either be rescued and God step in some kind of way, or water in your lungs. So much so that you can't get oxygen. And what kills you is the lack of oxygen. You think about it, you breathing water in and out. Now all the water got to do is get to here, and your eyes will feel like they about to pop out of your head. And here the Lord lists one of the worst ways to die. Not just you out in the middle of the lake somewhere and you can't swim. But we're going to add a millstone to you. Something that's much heavier than you are. You couldn't swim if you wanted to. The Lord is saying it's better for you. He's talking to us parents, us adults. It is better for you to be drowned with no possibility of being saved. You see that? Than to offend one of these little ones that believe in me and face me on judgment day. That's a sobering thought. You know why? Why he says little ones, one of these little ones? Because you provoke that little one. Now when we talk about little one, we're talking about children that still are under your care. You provoke that child to wrath. You provoke that child to anger. They might grow past you. They may grow up and become an adult, but you know what's going to happen? The same thing we read in the book of Hebrews. Bitterness. It'll spring up and it will defile people. So you've created a monster that society has to deal with. That's what makes that so grave. That's what makes that so serious in God's eyes. Your child can either have a nice demeanor, a pleasant demeanor because they grew up in a house of love, or they can be bitter. You may raise a child that's scared of you. They may be too scared to ever snap back at you, to ever talk back to you. But it doesn't mean that bitterness is not there. And the rest of the world will catch it. Everybody see that? They may even have enough sense not to ever snap back at you, not to ever do anything wrong to you. But everybody else is going to have to pay for it. And you know what that word offend means to cause to stumble. Parents, you claiming to be a Christian, you better act like it. You better be what you claiming.
Amen.
You as a parent, you can either help that child to love God or hate God.
Amen.
And they will hate God if the God you serve can't control your temper, can't control your mouth. Especially when it comes to them. You see. I am a firm believer. And my children will tell you, if I've done anything out of the way, if I have yelled at them in anger, I will ask for forgiveness.
Amen.
If I've done anything that's contrary to the word of God, and I'm a believer, and they know I'm professing Christ, if I do anything contrary to Christ, I'm going to ask for forgiveness. I don't care how much older I am than them.
Amen.
Because I don't want them to think that because I'm their parent, that my actions are excusable.
Amen.
I don't mind telling them, look, I fell short. Please forgive me. Because I don't want, you know what? I don't want them taking it out on God. I don't want them to grow up and hate the cause of God because they saw me being unrepentant.
Amen.
All right, let's go ahead and keep reading. Verse 7, woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must needs be that offenses come. But woe to that man by whom the offense cometh. Wherefore, if thy hand and thy foot offend thee, cut them off, cast them from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life, halt or maim, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast into everlasting fire. Everybody see that? That's talking about those things that you have in your life that's causing you to stumble. Listen, the devil is contagious. If it's causing you to stumble, it's going to cause somebody else to stumble. When Eve ate of that tree, she gave to her husband to eat. She didn't just eat it up by herself. She gave, you see. Verse 9, and if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes to be cast into hell fire. Take heed. Everybody see that? Take heed that ye despise not one of these what? One of these children. Yes, parents that have been pregnant for 9.5 months can learn to despise their children, can have something in their hearts towards their own child. And you can't hide it. You see that? The Lord, when the Lord say take, now everything he says is Bible. Everything that God speaks is Bible. But you can put an asterisk by it when he say take heed. Everything is take heed. Everybody understand? Everything that God says is take heed. But when he got to say it, when he has to say what's already understood, you need to double back to it. Take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones. You know why you despise? The same way a husband can despise a wife. Because you got to grow, and I expect you to do it on your own. You ought to already be there. Everybody see that? Take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones. For I say unto you, and he's telling you why you shouldn't do it, just in case you missed the rest of it, that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. Everybody see that? So just in case you ain't scared of drowning, just in case you think you a good enough swimmer, or you could swim with a stone hung around your neck that's heavier than you. Just in case you're not scared of the afterlife, and that you think you still got 50 more years to live. Let me tell you what's going on today. Today, that child that you despise, today that child that you are offending, that you are causing to stumble, today, that child's angel is before my Father. What is he doing there? What report is he bringing? Everybody see? What do angels do? They report to God about who they're protecting, who they're sent for. Yeah. Brother Bolden is down at it again, provoking that child. Don't bring judgment to them. Don't take it out on them. That's Brother Boulder. Now, what you have to know, I believe God has a plan for every individual. You don't become an adult before God write out His plan for your life. Everybody understand? You don't become an adult before God write out a plan. So God knew us in eternity before there was time.
Amen.
If that's the case, God have already written out a plan for us, even when we were a child. So what is the devil's job? To throw that child out of the way, out of that plan, to get them so far over in left field somewhere, they're not even thinking about the plan of God for their life. And how does he do it? He'll use you as a parent if you're not careful. The very one that's supposed to be bringing them into the purpose of God is the one that's pushing them away, provoking them. You ain't gonna never be nothing. You ain't gonna, I don't believe it. You see that? And the Lord is saying, just in case you don't believe the millstone story, just in case you overlook that and you think you got a whole life to live before you get into eternity and have to answer to me, let me tell you this. That child that I've written a plan for, no matter how rebellious they are now, you better not play a part in it. You better not play a part in that rebellion. You better not be the reason why they don't want to serve me.
Amen.
You see. Because if that's the case, God is hearing about it on a daily basis. Not just when you get here. We ain't going to find out about it when you're standing before me on Judgment Day. That's in heaven's ears now. Verse 11, look at what he says. For the Son of Man is come to save that which was what? Even that rebellious child. He's come for that one. You as a parent, you ought to know, you didn't come here saved. If we're not careful, we can think as parents, our children, they're just a lost cause. It ain't no hope for them. I guess God's got to teach them. No, you can teach them by being an example.
Amen.
Now, even if the devil does use them as children, don't you let that cross over to you and now the devil using you as well. You see. Like you've heard me say before, somebody got to be saved. And the load of the responsibility is on you as a parent. You see that? You're supposed to, children are not to be drawing you into their emotional battle and their emotionalism. Especially them little girls. Now you parents, that's got daughters, you know what I'm talking about. Them daughters, they'll give you more of the devil than the boys will. Oh yeah, they will. Little boys, they do stuff maybe just because they want to do it. Them little girls, it's a vindictiveness behind it. It's a whole plan. And now, if you've raised daughters, you know what I'm talking about. Them boys, they doing stuff, it ain't personal. It ain't personally against you. I just felt like riding my bike at midnight. Girl, it's a whole different story. It's that comes from a different place. You see, it comes from a different place with them. And God is telling us parents, oh, you better be beyond that. You better be the mature one. Amen. You better be. No, it's not easy raising children today. Well, I'm gonna tell you, when you have truly sold out to the Lord, you see things for what they really are. It's a spiritual war. You're not gonna win it with a carnal mind.
Amen.
Yes, there are some children that will act out. There are some children that's, acting out, that's doing whatever. But I'm going to tell you, and we have to just be upfront, a lot of that is our fault. You be stern from day one, it'll be right on day 100. And you start off letting them get in their way, you better, it's hard when you don't let them get their way and sass you until they 10. You let them get away with that, that boggles my mind. The first time they talk back to you, they should have been getting up off the floor. They should have been dreaming. The first time. You let it go, you just keep letting it go, keep letting it go. And then when you get tired of it, now you want to set boundaries. See, you can't feed the devil and not expect for him to come back. Now, a lot of that, again, is our fault as parents. We set those boundaries, they'll stay in it. They might not like it, they might despise it, but they'll stay in it.
Amen.
And some of you may think, well, I don't want my child to be scared of you, or scared of me. Well, how you think they're going to get along in your household? Somebody got to fear somebody. You can't depend on their relationship with God first. How old were you when you got saved? You see? No, you had some fear before. You see? And so that's the way God expects us to be. You better forget about this new age junk that teach you, if you want your children to love you and you to love your children, and you have to reward them when they do wrong and boost their self-esteem. When our children were in public school, we asked them, why is it y'all don't give out homework anymore? Oh, well, because studies show that it goes against self-esteem, and children, we don't, okay. No, you're creating lazy children. If my child is bringing home B's, they need to be doing homework. Because apparently they're not practicing enough in school, you see. And some of us have adopted that mindset with our children, where we, instead of us punishing them for wrong, we reward them. We try to buy them. And then we get mad when it don't work. The Lord didn't tell us anything about buying them or trying to purchase their goodness, where, because a lot of warped parents, them warped minds think that way. If I just give them what they want, they're going to act right. God created one man and one woman and gave them the whole world, and what did they do? And you think you're going to give them some of that grass you got outside and that's going to make them act right? There's no way to do it but God's way. If we do it God's way, we'll have better success. All right.
Amen.
All right. Do we have any questions or comments now? Yes, sir.
Question. Going back to how do you know if there's a disconnect between you and your children? Like if you gotten to that point.
What kind of disconnect?
Meaning I guess I think you use like the word emotional disconnect or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like not, like they're doing their own thing and you're doing your own thing now. Like y'all not communicating or anything like that. Like how do you know when it has gotten to that point? Like besides, like everybody been separated, I guess. Well,
if you just look at the look at what goes on in your house. I think I read somewhere once that the average conversation between a father and son, the father maybe a minute and a half per day. Per day. So that's one way to know there's a disconnect. Also, I believe children should want to talk to their parents. And parents should want to talk to their children. A lot of times when we engage and converse with our children, it's usually just giving orders. And when that's really all there is to it, okay, come get your food, take out the trash, go to bed, did you take your bath? When that's all the conversation you got, that's a disconnect. So, and one way we help our children is by limiting the distractions that they can have. I understand children want to play video games or whatever it is that they want to do, but that shouldn't be their life at home. You see, and of course adults as well. We're on our phones, still trying to hold on to Candy Crush. God does not want us to be disconnected with our children. If you look at things, television, radio, cell phones, all of these different things can serve as distractions from what's really important. You see what I mean? You think about it. How many of us have asked our children, what do you want to be when you grow up? What can I do to help you to become that? And why do you want to be that? How many of us have had those discussions with our children? You see, the way I see it, at 18, when our children get grown, most of them are going to want to leave, or be in a position to leave, whatever the case may be, to leave home. My mindset and what our mindset should be is, have I put in them what they need to make it in this world? Have I prepared them for what the world is, what it has to offer, what's going to come? Or have I told them yes to everything, and then it's going to be a big culture shock when the world says no? We have about 18 years to prepare our children for everything the devil has to offer, for everything that the world is going to bring. Have I prepared them for traffic? You see? Have they seen all of that? I'm the type, I believe in teaching children a lesson when we're out and about. Just about life, about what they see. One time I had my children with me, and I was driving back up here to Tennessee from Louisiana, and I was on a road where the speed limit was 55, and I was doing 73. I just thought, well, ain't nobody back here. I'm not going to hurt anybody. And it was a cop coming in the opposite direction. And he passed me up, of course. We all went into prayer mode. That didn't work. The lights came on. He turned around and came and got me. And he said, I pulled you over? I said, yes, sir. He said, yeah, you were speeding. Yeah, I said, I don't know. Ain't no use in arguing. He said, I'm going to give you a ticket. He said, but I'm not going to put on there what you were doing, what the speed limit that it was that you were doing. He said, because if I put that on there, then you have to go to court for reckless driving. He said, so I'm going to make it less. So I thanked him. Ain't no use in being mad. I was doing it. I pulled off. My children said, well, Daddy, he only pulled you over because you were black. And I corrected. Now, I could have let them keep that mindset. Yeah, you're right. He just picking on me. You know, I'm pretty dark skinned. I'm sure he saw me a mile away. No, children. I was speeding. And I was wrong. Y'all didn't see me fuss with the man and argue with him. If I had argued, I'd be going to court. So what was I doing? Teaching them to respect authority. From that day to this, I made it my choice to never speed again. That was a $250 ticket. Now I'm gonna tell you, you start thinking about other things you can do with that money. That right there was my motivation. Lord, I could have got what I had been saving up for. You remember that, treasure? They were trying to get me caught up and get me mad. No, I'm not mad. I'm mad at me for speeding. I could clearly see 55. And so I used that as a lesson to teach them and tell them I was wrong. Now I'm going to tell you, to me, it's still hard, you know, being used to doing 70 on 24 and then having to do 55 on Briley Parkway. It just feel like you crawling along, especially when you got folks zooming by you and folks behind you. They could have been went, but they just rather, you know, blow at you for the next 2 miles. But you know what I be thinking while they blowing? You gonna be saved today. I'm keeping you from a wreck. You'll thank me later. When the devil blowing at me, I'll be talking right back. So when my children are with me, I look for opportunities to teach them. You see, it just in everyday life about just different things about what they're gonna have to deal with. You break the law, you might get pulled over. You might have to pay for it. Now I'm gonna tell you. Even when I called and paid the ticket, when I called the lady to pay the ticket, because they had a number on there to call, and I think I was asking for the address or something like that. I can't remember if I sent in a check or if I just paid it over the phone. The lady, she deducted it even further. And she said, well, this is your first offense in our system, so we have a right to deducted, and I think I only ended up paying like $150. So she took another $100 off. Now I believe that was the Lord. Now I'm gonna tell you, our attitude towards things, it makes all the difference in the world. If I had been offended because the police officer was doing his job, I might be in trouble. You see, I might have had to pay that whole ticket, you see. But because that was the main thing I wanted my children to see. When you're wrong, accept it.
That's right.
God can help you more when you accept you're wrong. You see that? And so if there's a disconnect, I'm not speaking anything to them. I'm going through all kind of stuff where I could be teaching them something, but I ain't teaching them, you see. I'm not teaching them anything. And so that's how you know when there's a disconnect. When your whole dialogue just has to do with commands, just has to do with the functions of the day. Have you taken your bath? Did you brush your teeth? Did you wash your face? Did you take out the trash yet? You know. Yeah, you can play your game. You got 2 hours. Okay, well, didn't I tell you had 2 hours? Why are you still on it? Get off of it. You know. If that's your only conversation, then there's a disconnect. And you need to have a relationship with them. You see that? And I hear parents say, well, you know, my children, they can come and talk to me about anything. No, you're not going to come and talk to me about anything now. We're not going to be that close. You're going to still respect me, you see. But I believe that there need to be a connection. You see that? I talk to my boys, I tell you, I talk to them about who they like. You see. I was a boy once. I know what it is to want a girlfriend, and I'm not gonna walk around pretending like they don't have an interest. You see, so I try to open up that dialogue with them so they don't feel like they got to sneak around and well, that ain't conversation that I'd rather teach them the right way to have a relationship. You see that, and you've heard me say before. One of my best friends, he's older than me, and I'm 42. He's older than me, and him and his wife, they've been together since they were in the 6th grade or 7th grade. You see, 7th grade. So if we're not careful, we can think, oh, well, that's too young. Children can like each other and then actually grow up and get married. It is possible. They don't have to be in and out of relationships until they're 30, and then decide to get married. You see. And so if God have placed it in them to want to be in a relationship, then teach them the right way. Don't make that taboo where you don't want to talk about it. That it needs to be talked about. And we as parents, we ought to have that kind of connection when we're talking. No, I'm not. And see, parents, I'm going to give you, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to give you no protection. I'm going to tell you what the Bible says about it. You stay away from that until you marry.
Amen.
You ain't got to sneak out. You see, you ain't got to sneak nowhere. See? You ain't got to sneak out of windows or nothing. I'm not going to lock them down. I'm not going to do any of that. Just know when you come trying to get back through the door, it ain't going to be open. You see. So we try to open up dialogue for all of that. Just to make them know that that's a part of life. I wasn't 20 years old or 25 when I started liking somebody. You see. So that's what we mean. It's because they talking about it with somebody. It might not be you, but trust me, it's being talked about. So that's what we mean, that to have that connection and things like that. All right. Do we have any other questions or comments? Yes.
When you were talking about children's heroes should be their parents, I think I remember when I was in 3rd grade or something, we had an assignment. At some point we had an assignment to write about who our heroes are or something. And I think that you couldn't use your parents as that, and they would say you have to use other things. I just thought that was pretty crazy.
Yeah. Now what does that tell us, class? I thought about that when I was saying that. What does that tell us? The fact that they have that assignment about you writing about your hero, but they don't want it to be your parents. That shows you how just that very subtle programming. What if you don't have any heroes besides that? You see, that is very, very subtle. All right. Do we have any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
I have a comment, going back to training our children. And I remember when John was about 18 months old, and about this age, when children are walking around the table, pulling up, and you know how people will say they move all they love whatnots, from off the table because, they don't want the children. I never moved anything. John would walk around that table and I would say, no, no. And I did that several times. And after a while he caught on and he would get ready to touch something and he would look at me and say, no, no. and see, then he knew, to not to bother. But we teach our children, our children will make us shame, when we get out, in public. But our job is to teach them at home, where we can take them to other people's houses, or to the grocery store, anywhere, and they not falling all out, and everybody looking at you wondering why you letting them, do all that. We train them at home. retrain them.
Amen. All right, do we have any other questions or comments?
I have a question. What do you think it stems from if your children do make you angry? Like if they do something and you know, do something and you get mad, you know, so mad to where you want to hit them, but you don't, because you feel if you hit them, you're going to hurt them too bad.
It could be a couple of things. If you get, it could be a spirit of anger that's already there. Like, but I think, you know, and the Bible tells us to be ye angry and sin not. So I imagine we all have the potential to get angry. But another thing is, the other thing that more than likely what it could stem from is you're allowing your children to get away with too much already. And what happens is it builds up. That's why I say if they do something today, you spank them today. Mm-hmm. Don't let it build up, you see that? Because what happens is then that's where it all comes in. It's just like what we talked about last week about the gall of bitterness. That gall is a bladder, is a sack that's stored up. And what happens is your child do something wrong, and you think, well, I'm gonna give you a pass today, or I'm not gonna do anything to you today. But that don't mean that it's not stored up on the inside of you. And so so what happens is if you don't deal with them today, they will think they have a license to continue on. And what happens is we can train our children to watch us. Well, I'm gonna try this and see what mood she's in. Okay, she's in a good mood, so I'm gonna keep pushing. I'm gonna keep trying. You see, that's why I say you spank them whether you're in a good mood or bad mood, whatever mood you're in. If they need to be spanked, spank them. Don't wait until they done made you mad to spank them, because then it's not about what they've done wrong, but more about if mama is in a place where she could receive all the bad that I'm doing. You see, in other words, she's in a good mood today, so we can do whatever. And so that's what a lot of that may come from, is just letting them get away with too much already. I tell you, you stop it at the door, it won't. They'll learn. They won't. You set those boundaries from the jump. You see that? You don't let them get to you. You see, you don't let them get to you. You start spanking them when they need it. You set boundaries when they need it. You see. All right. Do we have any other questions or comments? All right, so now we'll ask if what stood out to anybody. I guess that's what I'll be asking, but I guess I gotta ask it that way.
One thing for me was like just going into depth of how you can provoke your children and things like that, and how you can train your children to really be a certain way, and teach them to hate God, just the same way you put it, to hate God and things, and how we should be more involved in everything that they're doing, like wanting to know more about them and things like that, and not always, just like you said, let it be commands and things like that.
Another that stood out to me was that when you said we should feel blessed, the Lord has blessed us with the responsibility to pour into a person and raise them in the Lord like that. I wouldn't have ever thought of it that way. That's a blessing to have that responsibility.
For me, it's the question that you asked, who's responsible for the deterioration of the relationship between parent and child. And I remember looking back over my life at some point, I think it was after Jasmine and Jaquetta they were like 18 or over, at least 18 or over. And I remember thinking, gosh, when did I stop being so affectionate towards them, and, you know, just loving on them and telling them, you know, how much I love them and all of that, just being so happy about them, to having this disconnect with them, because there came a point where there was a disconnect, you know, like between us, like, and it was, you know, I don't know, I guess, you know, kind of like some of the things you described here. And I remember looking back over that, and that very thing came to me, and I have to say the Lord just helped me to see that it was like when it was at a point when they were becoming teenagers and things like that, and, you know, the attitudes and the smart mouth and things like that that I had to deal with, it was like, instead of me dealing with that from a biblical standpoint, it was like I took it personally, and it caused a disconnect, because then there was bitterness that was building up and building up and building up. And like I said, I didn't recognize it when I was going through it, but I was able to look back over my life at some point some years ago and see that, wow, you know, like, you have to be careful. Like you said, if something happens that needs to be addressed, or something happens that requires discipline, as parents, we have to be able to do that and still renew mercies and allow room for growth, and allow still the opportunity to nurture that relationship with the parent and the child, and not allow that to be lost in the midst of discipline and things that may be going on. And it takes the Lord to do that. It really does.
Do we have anyone else want to share? Yes.
Mine was when you said that parents should have a relationship with their kids, because I always, I don't know, I thought that, okay, well, these are my parents, and, like, I guess I didn't think it was okay to have a relationship with them beyond you command me to do something and not do it. And so that, to me, that was an eye opener to know that, like, you can have a relationship with your parents, and it doesn't have to be just you giving commandments and I do it. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it can go beyond that.
Because if you think about it, what does that kind of relationship, and that if that's all it is to it, what does that produce? If the relationship is just you giving commandments and I'm following, what is that going to produce? It's going to, bitterness is going to produce it. Because if that's all you had with the Lord, then what would you do? How would you be? Very few people in the Old Testament had a real righteous relationship with God. Why? Because all they saw was Moses and the law. So just a bunch of commands. So in other words, I can keep your commandments and still not know who you are, still not have a relationship with you, and still not have any kind of affection towards you because of that. And so what happens with children, it can create, especially with children, that can create bitterness. That's what creates the disconnect when the child disconnects from the parents, when they think all the relationship is commands. Take out the trash. After a while, the devil may start telling them, that they just think you're a slave. The same, and you think about it. I've worked in a workplace where I just went to work, did what I was told to do and was supposed to do, and then went home. Most of us have worked somewhere like that. And then I worked in a workplace where the boss knew your name. Every time he saw you, he was speaking, "Hey, how are your children doing? Are you still like working here?" Every month they're having a family gathering for all the people to bring their families and we all eat out together. You see, it makes a difference there. You glad to work at that kind of place. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be glad to have a job, but I'm just saying you can tell the difference there, where your supervisors care about you. You know, that ain't just you just a number, come in, clock in, do what we tell you to do, and go on home. You see, and it's the same way with the parents. You think about it, you got 18 years of that. 18 years. You see, and if that's all you got is take out the trash, that's all they know how to do, is what you commanded, you failed. If you haven't taught them how to get along in life, and I'm gonna tell you one of the most important things you can do, teach them how to deal with all the different personalities. You see, it won't be long before they're smarting off at work and getting sent home. You see, and so we prepare our children. You see that, and we don't do it with just commands and just having that type of relationship. All right, anyone else? Let me share.
Just one more quick comment. When you was talking about just a while ago about getting the ticket, you know, and years ago, you know, I went through a particular situation like that, but it's like, you know you're doing wrong. You know you're doing over the speed limit, you know, anything that's illegal. And when we do that, we out from under God's cover. You know, so anything can happen to us. You know, while we out from under God's cover.
Amen. Amen.
And I tell you, just to add to that having that mindset of trying to get over, you know, if you can't obey the simple laws of the land, the speed limit say 55, and you got to do 65 or 70, don't think for 1 minute you're gonna obey God's word. You see, now God ain't writing nobody tickets. You see, so what I'm saying is that man's laws are more immediate, and if you can excuse obeying that, then there'll come a day where you excuse God's laws because you'll think, well, I can repent. You know, I got time to grow or whatever it is you think you got time for. So that's important. That's something that we stress. The Bible tells us to do that, to obey the commands of men, to obey the laws of the land. That's simple, and we're supposed to do that. Because if we compromise in that, we'll compromise in our spiritual walk as well, and that is part of our spiritual walk. All right. We have any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I've been in situations like that where parents were like speeding and stuff, and I would be in the back of the car when I was younger, and it made me feel a certain way towards them, where I was like, don't you know us children is in the back of the car and you driving and speeding, like you don't love me and stuff like that, like putting my life in danger. Like it's scary for children, like when it's purpose, like you know? So I guess that's like a way where a child can be a certain way toward their parents because of things like that.
All right, anyone else? All right, we want to remind everyone to continue to lift up the Evans family in your prayers. Yeah, continue to lift them up in your prayers, and continue to also lift up one another in your prayers. All right. If that's all now, we'll go and dismiss you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ.